Hey everybody, this is Mr. Matthew here, and I'm going to give you a quick walkthrough of some of the key pieces of how to put the population growth of algae lab together. Now, I'm not going to give you every bit of detail in here, but I'm going to give you some examples about how to set it up and some of the materials that you're going to use. So your group is want to get a bunch of materials, so I actually have built a stock of salt water. That's what's in here. I use a 0.35%. That means 3.5 grams of sea salt in 100 milliliters of water. So I put 35 grams in this full liter container. That's my stock that I'm going to use for all my bottles here. I have a container of algae. I've got a large set of algae, so I've poured some of it into here from our larger stock. I shook it up and got a stock there. I've gotten fertilizer. I have made a fertilizer from one of the many containers of fertilizer we have. This is an NPK fertilizer. It turns out that it ends up being roughly 2.5 grams per liter, which means it's a 0.25, or sorry, it is a, 2.5 grams per liter. So it's about a 0.25% solution that I made. So I've made that. And then I've also got my Falcon tubes. These are conical centrifuge tubes, and they are the 50 mil size. So they've got the graduations up to 50 mils. And then I also have this device that's referred to as a mini Secchi disc. And it looks like this. And the mini Secchi disc has this sort of little container on the bottom, or a little thing on the bottom that is going to be for reading, and I'll explain how this is used after I've done the setup. All right, so I'm not going to tell you exactly how to do setup, but I am actually going to set up an experimental tube. But you're going to want to take your rack of tubes, and you're going to want to set it up so that you've got at least one type of negative control. I'm not going to tell you how to do that. You should check with your teacher about that. Also, I'm going to set up one positive control. Again, not going to explain it. And then my experimental tube. And so in this particular case, I'm asking the question, how does adding fertilizer, impact the growth rate of my algae? So that's my question. Does it increase it? Does it decrease it? At what rate does it increase or decrease? Sort of those type of things that I'm looking at. So I'm actually going to get rid of pretty much all my tubes except for just the one tube of interest for myself. So I'm going to take these and lay them off to the side. And obviously, if I was setting up my experiment, I would get some labeling tape, and I'd get a marker, and I would label all my different tubes so that I knew what I have. You want to have at least one negative control, at least one positive control, and then you want to have some replicates of your experiment. Again, I'm not setting up an experiment. I'm just demonstrating some of the pieces. So let me move some of the items off to the side. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some water to it. And because I'm going to do a roughly 50-50 mix between my salt and my water, I'm going to add 20 mils of salt water to my tube. There are graduations on here. So this again is my salt water. So I am going to add to the 20 mil line. Perfect. And that's exactly where I want. And then I am going to add, reseal that. I am going to add another 20 mils of my algae solution. And I have decided that I'm going to, in this setup, I'm going to add some amount of fertilizer. And again, that's what I've done. Now, if I'm setting up a control that does not have fertilizer, I am going to want to replace this amount with salt water. So my control might have salt water in it instead of this fertilizer, so that my volumes and dilutions will be appropriate. So I want all my tubes to have the same total volume. In this particular case, I have set a total volume that I've decided for myself. All of my tubes, regardless of whether they're test or experiment or what, should have the same amount in them, right? So now what I've done is I've got my tube, and again, this would have a label on it, and if this is my experimental tube, I would do multiple replicates of this. So I would have at least 3 tubes like this, maybe as many as 5 tubes that are set up like this, but I have multiple of these so that when I collect my data, I'm not just getting a single data point on this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to now use my mini Secchi disc, and I am going to drop this down in here until I cannot see the little black and white lines on here. And so what I've done is I've dropped it down to a certain point, and what I find is that when I do that, I will then see a level at which I can see this, and it gives me a distance of 40, I'm going to say this looks like it's a 43. So when I hold this up, and I'll try to show this up to the camera, when I hold this up, when I'm looking down the barrel of this tube, I can see the little black and white lines until I get down to this point where I've stopped. And at this point where I have stopped it, I can't actually see the lines in between the black and the white where that occurs. And as a result of that, I'm deciding that that is the point at which my cloudiness or my opaqueness is sort of the maximum level that I'm going to read, or my reading level, the level I'm going to read at this. Now, the idea here is that if this solution is clearer, okay, meaning there's less algae, I should be able to lower this down further down. If it is more algae, I'm not going to be able to drop it down quite as far. Now, the important thing is that I'm going to set this up and let it settle. So the next time I come and do my reading, likely some of the algae will settle down to the bottom. So I'm going to always want to shake it up before I do my reading. So I'm just going to, because this is my first day, I'm going to make sure that nothing settled while I was talking. And again, I had recorded down that it was 42 or 43. So I'm now going to go again. You want to have good quality lights over top. And I'm going to do this again. And I still think it is, yeah, I'm still seeing it right at that 43 mark is where I can't really see the graduations anymore for this. Now, will your initial readings be different than mine? Absolutely. Could you do a lot less algae to start? I mean, that's only about halfway down this tube. Maybe you're like, oh gosh, that's not very far down. Maybe I want to use less than that. You can pick whatever amount of algae you want to start. You may run this experiment and realize, well, there really wasn't much of a difference. Maybe if I started with less algae, I would be able to get a stronger reading over time. That's just how I decided to set this up for the first time. So hopefully that is helpful for you, and it gives you enough to organize and set it up, and then use the ability to come up with an initial procedure and collect some data. All right. Hope that helps, and I'll talk to everybody soon.